about 10 minutes or so. Kirtan is like call response. I'll sing, you can respond after me. Just sing Hare Krishna. Everybody knows, so it's easy. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare
Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Ready to start? Still waiting for some more people.
Yeah, I think we are expecting more people. But I think we can start.
So anybody here for the first time for this program? You're here for the first time? Am I sitting in the wrong place?
No. I think people can come forward. Everybody can come forward.
When I look straight, I don't see anybody.
Please go.
Sure.
If you can come here, it would be nice.
भी चैंटिंग कर रहे हैं प्रोग्राम?
I think since we have a couple of people also new, I think what we might do is read about what we're doing, and then it will make more sense why we're chanting.
Sure.
有位科生说，刚才听过那个发生的。
So, thank you all for coming on this Sunday morning. My name is Anand Vilas Das, and I'm from Harrisburg. Very happy that Devendra and his family are trying to conduct a Krishna consciousness program in Reading. It makes me very happy to be able to come and share what I have learned over my many years of practice. Hopefully, with sharing what I have learned, I'll be able to induce you also to consider this path of bhakti seriously and understand what we're trying to do here and why it makes sense for others to try this path. So before we begin, what we'll do is we will study some excerpts from some books that we have in this format. And then we will discuss any questions and other points other people may have. And we'll keep this in a very interactive manner, as opposed to me sitting and speaking for an hour and then people just listening. So we'll keep it very interactive, which means that interactive means that you can get to ask questions as we go through this material, and at the same time I also get to ask questions. So that's what interactive means. So before we begin, if I could have someone at least start with maybe sharing what their expectation was when they came to this program. I know some of you are here for first time, second time, very few times. So apart from Devendra calling you and forcing you to come, what was your expectation what would you get from, and even children are allowed to answer, right? So what was your expectation, what you wanted to get out of this program? It could be something, doesn't have to be very lofty philosophical ideas, it could be something very simple, whatever you have in your heart. So at least if you can share a little bit, then we will make our attempts to try to meet the goals that you have, that you feel more inspired to come. Because if you're expecting something and you get something completely different, then there's no value in coming again, right? So anybody can start. Who would like to share? Yes,
Let me start. Actually, my idea is to learn what are all the good things I can do in this life, how to better utilize the life. At the same time, get some peace of mind, concentration.
Can you give me a pen? I want to make sure I write all these points down. Thank you. He's going to give me something where I can keep it. Yeah, this is good enough. Thank you. He was saying peace of mind, better realization of life. What else?
Concentration.
concentration. Yes, Sri, you have some points.
No, see, in this busy life where we are so preoccupied with our thoughts about what we're going to do tomorrow, whom we're going to answer, what my manager is going to ask, some sort of outlet where you can sit and think about something more spiritual, something more constructive, which will relieve you of all those thoughts, and that itself is sort of relaxation for you. So, at least the beginning somewhere. You have to start somewhere.
So outlet for something more spiritual, relaxation. Okay, so just got a couple points. Deepika? Any points from you?
If I do chanting and like the aarti and everything, I do every day in the morning. So the whole day I feel really good. Feel really nice. Really nice.
Okay. So your question is why you feel good, or question is why can't you feel good every day?
No, I feel good.
Okay. So spiritual activities make you feel good. Manoj, you have any points?
Yeah, well, my only not concern, I mean, my only expectation is like if we are going towards a Krishna conscious and we are more involved in this bhakti program and getting together, chanting the holy name, then our nature is kind of changing. Like we are not going towards the bad activities, the demonic nature. I mean, then basically our overall life changes. I will say, when we are not going towards bad things, at least. So
is that
if
your
we-
concern, or is that
No, that's the expectation for me. Like, you know, if we do it regularly, then we are protected. I mean, it's good thing that we should do it very often, and so that's what my expectation is. I mean, at least once in a week or twice. As soon as we are not in the touch, then you will start to feel some difference in the life, that you're missing something.
Just something that I would like to add to what we have been talking is that generally when I was in India so many years back, I used to actually visit some of these congregations where we actually have elderly people, learned people, spiritually people who have actually conquered whatever that senses that they have. When they actually come and start relating their experiences, they usually, well, one good thing about the Hindu culture itself is that we everything that we have, it is actually shared as an anecdote, so it is easy to remember, to relate things to. So when I listen to those stories, it's like even the simplest story that I must have read when I was a 2-year-old kid or a 3-year-old kid from Panchatantra or Jataka tales or whatever it is. It says the moral of the story is at the end, but then for relating that moral, there's a small story that is related, which actually tells you who the good person is, who the bad person is. It's not that somebody is bad always or somebody is evil all the time. It's the circumstances that actually makes them good or bad. So when those anecdotes and those stories are related, it's where we try to mix, how you mix medicine with a little bit of honey and then give it. So it goes in much well. Like a spoonful of sugar makes the medicine go down, sort of concept. So you tend to understand that spiritual concept much better when it is told through a story, and that's how many of the gurus have actually tried to even document their experiences. It was only through an experience, not from just a preaching saying that just don't do this. For example, like even I've heard about a story where Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, when her mother actually brought her, I hope I can tell the story. This mother who's bringing her child, who's 5-6 years old, the son, he's constantly eating good jaggery. So what happens is, like she comes and says, Guruji, can you please tell him not to eat good? Then the Guruji says, okay, can you come after 2 days? Guruji says, okay, fine. Says, why does the Guruji say come after 2 days? Then the child comes with the mother after 2 days. The Guruji says, can you just give me 1 more day? Come after 1 more day. So after the 3rd day, the child is brought by the mother, and then the Guruji says, Beta, eating good is not good for your health, so stop eating good. And the Shishya asks him, why is it that you didn't tell it on the first day? This is a simple thing. You could have told it on the first day. Why you didn't tell it on the first day? Why did you take 3 days to tell this? He said, I love good. I am an addict to good. So if I have to tell him something, I need to first practice. So basically practice before you preach.
Right.
So it was something that he experienced in his life, which came out as a small anecdote or a story. So just an example. I hope I have not taken
Thank you for sharing.
session
Thank you
away
for
from.
sharing.
But these are the things which actually help in understanding a concept better.
Prabhu, you want to share anything?
Well, I just come here because it's rare to find a spiritual association these days, and good to meet sadhus, innocently people, and just associate with them. It's a good vibe, and it helps me grow spiritually.
So those of you who don't know Anil Prabhu, he's a sadhu himself. He just came back from Vrindavan just a few days back. So he's sitting very humbly in the back, so let's not think that he's not a sadhu. He's a bigger sadhu than me. So thank you, Prabhu, for coming and giving your association to us. What is your name, please?
Siddharth.
Siddharth. So what we are trying to gather is what the various attendees expect to take out of this program on a regular basis attending. So I'm just trying to gather some information, and then we can try to address that at least in this session. So apart from being forced by him to come, what other expectations you had out of the session like this?
I mean, in the beginning, I was not too much into it. I mean, I didn't. But after a while, after seeing last session and understanding, that there are worldly things and there are things that you should really, care about. So I thought, okay, it's something to understand what life is and what should be the objective. So, and we go along to see.
And what is your name?
Rachna.
It would be nice if everybody could come slightly
Yes,
this side because it's a very wide arc for me to even see. Or maybe I should just sit that side. I can see everybody.
No, that's fine. You will go.
Do you have any thoughts, Rachna?
I want our kids to learn whatever we learn in India. We also, many things we don't know, so yes.
Thank you all for sharing. So the idea, again, is to try to answer all these questions, maybe not all in one shot, but over a period of time, be able to answer some of these questions. Peace of mind, how to utilize life better, improve concentration, have spiritual aspects, have stories that can teach us by example, spiritual activities that make you feel better, how do you keep associating spiritually, understand the objective of life, and also give kids the proper example that we can follow. So we will start with the notes that you have. This is from a book called Namamrita, or the Nectar of the Holy Name. And the title of this talk, this is from a book called Teachings of Lord Chaitanya, TLC, which Srila Prabhupada wrote. So in this age of logic, argument, and disagreement, where everybody's argumentative, so much disagreement, the chanting of Hare Krishna is the only means of self-realization. This is a very bold statement that's made, which is, it's like a hypothesis in one sense, right? So hypothesis is made, And then there's a process, just like any scientific process. There's a statement that's made that this is what the answer to the problem is. And then there is a process that's defined that can help you see that systematically. And once you see that systematically, you're able to realize that that is indeed correct. Right? So just like any other scientific theory that's propounded, right? Someone says that, okay, if water is made up of hydrogen and oxygen. Two atoms of hydrogen, one atom of oxygen makes one molecule of water. Make that statement, but then there has to be some process by which I can systematically show you that is indeed the case. Either I take water and I extract hydrogen and oxygen out of that, or I take hydrogen and oxygen and combine them somehow and make water out of that. That's how I can say, see, I made a statement that water is made up of hydrogen and oxygen, and then I gave you a process, and also I gave you the knowledge with which you can learn. So if Mona or any other child wants to figure out, if your son wants to figure out how water is made up of hydrogen and oxygen, then at this point in time they don't have the knowledge or the skills to actually do that. But as they continually study systematically, then the expectation is that they will acquire the skills and the knowledge to be able to experimentally prove it and figure it out. So spiritual knowledge is like that. It's systematically learned, and some of the questions that we have may be questions that will take a little bit of practice for us to be able to realize the answers, and some of the questions are questions that can be answered pretty quickly. So the way we have to progress is systematically realize that even in material world, real world, that we call real world, the knowledge that we gain is gathered systematically. We don't gather knowledge totally unsystematically, where we get all the information that we need on day one. It's systematically gathered over a long period of time. So then we get to a point where we understand things in a systematic manner over a period of time. Similarly, spiritual knowledge is like that. So it's not like a firehouse where I'll open the fire hose and you drink through it and then all the knowledge will come or anything of that sort. It's a systematic process, drip by drip. Then we will get that. So the way we will do this is, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 paragraphs. Some paragraphs are very small, some paragraphs are slightly larger, but that's fine. So we'll just go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 and read one paragraph each. Okay? Manoj, you can start.
In the age of logic, argument and disagreement, the chanting of the Hare Krishna is the only mean of self-realization. In 3 out of 4 millenniums, namely Satyuga, Treta Yuga and Dwapar Yuga, people had the honor of to be able to understand transcendence through the path of disciplic succession. However, in the present age, people have no interest in the disciplic succession. Instead, they have invented many paths of logic and argument. This individual attempt to understand the supreme transcendence, called the ascending process, is not proved by the Vedas.
So let's try to understand what this means. So as per each system of knowledge has a certain way in which they break down time. In the Vedic system, time is broken down in yuga cycles. So according to the Vedic system, the current yuga that we are living in is called Kali Yuga. Kali Yuga's duration is 432,000 years. If you want to write that down, if you're making notes, you can write that down. It's 432,000 years. And Kali Yuga started 5,000 years ago. After Lord Krishna left this earth, that's when Kali Yuga started. So we are in just 5,000 years of Kali Yuga. People have no interest in disciplic succession, meaning understanding Shastra and knowledge from the proper source. Instead, they've invented many paths of logic and argument. And And the individual attempt to understand the supreme transcendence, called the ascending process, is not approved by the Vedas. So again, the ascending process is, what does that mean? There are two systems of learning which are prevalent. One is the ascending process and the other is descending process. The ascending process is, I take some inference, right? So for instance, give you an example. You see a car on the road whizzing past and you don't see a driver in the car, but it's logical to assume that somebody is driving the car. You don't assume that it's driving on its own because you don't see a driver. So it's one sense of kind of an ascending knowledge. You're taking one fact and you're building on it, you're making some inferences, you have some assumptions, you have some facts, then you build on it, till you get to a point where you understand what the knowledge is. Descending process is if somebody who's authoritative gives you information and you accept it as is, that yes, this is true. So for instance, one of the examples that Prabhupada also writes about is that if, and he speaks about it also, that if someone is an orphan, a boy is an orphan, he doesn't know who his father is, right? So, but he knows he must have father. So the atheistic mentality is that since I don't know who my father is, since I cannot see him, obviously I don't have a father. Right? That is the atheistic mentality. An atheist will think like that way, that since I cannot see God, then obviously there is no God. Right? That is the atheistic mentality. The agnostic mentality, what is the Hindi translation of agnostic?
No, I mean, who's neutral.
Yeah, so atheistic is Gnostic.
Yeah.
But agnostic actually literally means one without knowledge. Although it is considered like a good thing now that you're agnostic, it's really, the meaning of agnostic means agyani. It comes from the same word, agyan and agnostic is basically the same meaning. So an agnostic person would say, well, maybe I have a father, but I don't know who he is, and it doesn't really matter who he is. Right? But a person who has some sense would try to figure out who his father is, and there are multiple ways. If the person is interested in ascending knowledge, then he could keep on asking every man he meets if he's his father, or he could do some DNA testing on every person he meets to systematically gather that information on who his father could be. But if he's interested in descending knowledge, then he could just ask his mother. And his mother will authoritatively tell him who his father is. And so, it's one example. Similarly, our Shastras have given so much emphasis on teaching us what the truth is. The Acharyas, the teachers, the spiritual masters, they have given us, through disciplic succession, Shastric knowledge. So, the Shastras say that it is not possible to gain knowledge about your origin by ascending process. It has to come from descending process. Right? So it has to come from descending process. So the process of ascending knowledge gathering methodology is not approved by the Vedas. That's what this paragraph means. Is that clear? Does paragraph make sense? Okay. So somebody can read second paragraph.
The absolute must descend from absolute platform. He is not to be understood by the ascending process.
A small paragraph, but I'll explain this anyway. So it's just an extension of what I said earlier. That if you are inside a well, deep well, then other people who are in the well with you cannot get you out of the well. Right? Can somebody else also in the well with you can get you out of the well? No. Only someone outside can get you out of the well. So similarly, we have so many deficiencies that it's a given, right? I mean, even forget about spiritual discussions. Even normal people will talk about to err is human, right? They say that human beings will prone to make mistakes. We know that we make mistakes. Even people who are non-spiritual admit that human beings, you have deficiencies, you will make mistakes. You're not infallible. right? So if you make mistakes and you have so many limitations in terms of intellectual capacity, emotional capacity, sensory capacity, right? We know that. There's only so much we can see, only so much we can hear, only so much we can know. So we have so many limitations. In spite of having so many limitations and also knowing that we're prone to make mistakes, how can we have supreme confidence that we will, on our own, try to figure out something which is much broader than ours? So the absolute truth must descend from the absolute platform. So someone who knows the truth. So in the Shastra, in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 4, towards the end of the Bhagavad chapter 4, there's a verse that says, Tad vidhi pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya upadeshanti te jnanam jnanina tattvadarshina. Which means, Tad vidhi pranipatena. So we have to offer submissive service to a spiritual master, to a guru, to a person who has the knowledge, and inquire from him submissively. So if you want to get some information, rather than inquire from a very argumentative or disruptive manner, submissively try to gather information. And jnanina tattvadarshina, upadeshanti te jnanam. So they will give us the knowledge because they have seen the truth. So someone who has seen the truth can give you the truth. Someone who is in ignorance cannot really give you any truth. Right? So if you need some directions, and if you ask another person who's also lost, he cannot help you. So he has to be able to only help you with if he's seen it. So the next paragraph, before we can read.
The holy name of Lord, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. It's a transcendental vibration because it comes from the transcendental platform, the supreme abode of Krishna. Because there is no difference between Krishna and his holy name, the holy name of Krishna is as pure, perfect, and liberated as Krishna himself.
So this is again a statement that's made by Srila Prabhupada, that the holy name of Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, is a transcendental vibration because it comes from the transcendental platform, the supreme abode of Krishna. So we were chanting Krishna's name, we were doing some kirtan, and then we will do a round of chanting also. So what Prabhupada is telling us is that this is not material, this is spiritual sound, and by repeating this sound, it has spiritual benefit. So it's a mantra, and it's not just any mantra, it's Maha Mantra. Mantra, man means mind, and tra means one that delivers. So things like being able to control the mind, being able to get peace, all these things are possible if we are able to control the mind. If our mind is all over the place and running wild, it's very difficult to be peaceful. Right? Similarly, there's a question about what is the goal of life. The goal of life is actually very easy. The goal of life is to be happy. Right? Can anybody deny that that is the goal of life? If that was not the goal of life, then we would not be doing anything. We have jobs, we try to get married, we try to have children, we try to make our kids study well, we have nice homes, we paint our walls of our home. We do all these things, we buy nice cars, everything we do so that we can try to get happy. Nobody does anything to get distressed, right? Anybody is trying to do something to get distressed? No. We all try to do this to get happy. But still, there's some happiness, but there's also not complete happiness. There's not full satisfaction. Because the Shastras teach us that we are trying to find happiness in wrong places, and that is the reason why we don't feel happy. So, the process of chanting the holy name gives us connection to the spiritual realm, which can really make us happy. How does that work, and why does that work? As Krishna says in the second chapter of the Gita, he gives the knowledge of the soul. So the first thing that we learn as part of our process of any transcendental process that we practice is that ultimately we are soul, we are not body. So the living entity that's inside us is what's really the person. The outer body is just the covering, right? So as people who come from India, inherently I've heard this millions of times, so they kind of inherently think that is what it is. But do we really understand it is the question, right? So repeating it is one thing, but like for example, even the most materialistic person would say, yeah, you know what, we came empty-handed, you're going to go back empty-handed. Everybody knows all these points. But then they live their life in such a way that they're so greedy and they won't hesitate to cheat somebody or even destroy somebody's life to make money. But if your understanding is that you're going to come empty-handed and go empty-handed, then why would you do all that? So the point is not theoretically just repeating it, but actually practically realizing it. Right? So practically realize that each of us is a spirit soul with Jiva, Jivatma, and intimately connected with God. That's how we're all connected. Then if I realize that, then very difficult for me to speak harshly to somebody or be not compassionate. True compassion can come only if there is a connection. Otherwise, why will you have compassion? Right? When we heard the news about this tragedy that happened on Friday in Connecticut, the senseless killing, each of us was deeply impacted. Why? Because we also have children and we feel that connection. Immediately we're able to sense that connection. Right? So we feel that connection. So the compassion comes because we're able to feel connection. Right? Now, in a slaughterhouse somewhere, if thousands of cows get slaughtered, similarly, people don't feel that impacted. Why? Because the connection is not there. It's like dehumanized. Right? And I'm not launching into a whole vegetarianism discussion here, but I'm just telling you the one aspect. For instance, if you read about how they refer to even cattle, they refer to them as beef. They say, we're raising beef in our farm-raised beef. So they're referred to as beef. They're not referred to as cows. They're not referred to as cattle. They're referred to as beef. So the idea is that you're referring to them as beef, so you already dehumanize them completely. So the idea is that you're referring to them as the end product that will come after you slaughter them. So then it's already dehumanized, so there is no question of feeling any compassion. Right? But if you refer to them as, the same way, but if you refer to somebody who's raising dogs to be killed and eaten, it's considered pretty disgusting in America, right? People go to jail for that, right? So it's considered pretty disgusting. So it's just a consciousness that how you connect. And compassion is because why people feel compassionate when dogs are mistreated? Because there's a connection that has been built. People have pets, and then when they see some of the dog mistreated, they see that they have a dog as well, and if their dog was mistreated, how would they feel? But they don't have cows that they have any connection with, so they feel that way. So it's really a connection thing. So how can you feel compassion for other living beings, other human beings, if you don't really understand what the connection is? Not possible. And the real connection is Krishna, God. The God that's in everyone's heart is the same. The Paramatma form, the Lord sitting in everyone's heart is the same. That is how we are all connected. Right? If that connection is not known, then how there can be any compassion? There cannot be any compassion. And how do you develop that connection? By understanding how you connect with God in the first place. And the process that's given is chanting of the holy name. So I will read the next paragraph. Academic scholars have no entrance by means of logic and other argument into the understanding of the transcendental nature of the holy name of God. So for instance, I'll give you a simple example, right, that we all can experience. There's a young boy and a young girl. Right? They see each other and they fall in love with each other. What is the logic behind that? Can you explain? Why he fell in love with this girl or not with that girl? What is the logic? Did he make some calculation based on, okay, the chances of intelligent progeny is the highest with this girl, and they do a DNA analysis, try to figure out, based on if I marry this girl and have children, the children have maximum chance of being most intelligent, or nothing of that sort. Right? It's a connection of the heart. Some people you meet for the first time, and for no reason you feel that you want to talk to them, you like them. It's not like they've done anything for you or you've not done anything for them. And some people, they may not have done anything to you and still you don't really like them that much. Why is that? Is there a logic? No. So a lot of things that we do in life, like even foods we eat, some people don't like certain things. Why? Is there a logic for that? No. Some people like certain things, some people don't like certain things. There's no logic. Why you like blue color, why not green? That's why it's called like. Systematic. Similarly, let's given a mundane example, but really in spiritual topics also, when the connection of love happens, it's very difficult for logically to explain what you can experience it, you cannot explain it. How is the sweetness of Rasgulla different from sweetness of Gulab Jamun? Can you explain? You have to eat and then you can figure it out. They're both sweet, right? Are they different? Taste? Yeah, but how is it different? Can you explain? I'll give you as much time as you want to write a paragraph on it. Can you write? How are they different? Or just try to explain to your American colleague who's never eaten, huh?
Different way we make, like we cook in a
No,
different way.
I'm not talking about taste. You can make anyhow. How does it taste different in your mouth? Can you explain?
Why would I like some gulab jamun and why would she like
Not
rasgulla?
explain. It's right. So if you cannot explain such simple things, how you want to explain logically how holy name of Krishna works and how we can make connection with God? You cannot explain simple things, right? So that is the way the mind works, especially in Kali Yuga. That we have no answers to simple questions that we see in daily life, but we want to get instant answers for the most complex questions that most of us have very little qualification to even ask those questions. So, does it mean that we are not qualified to get answers? Does it mean that we should not expect answers? No, the answer is not that. The answer is, yes, we should expect the answers, but we should be ready to follow a path that can give us those answers. It's not like 2-minute ramen noodles that you put it in the microwave and 2 minutes later you have the answer. It's not like that. You have to practice the process, right? Like, I went to engineering school. I know, which is easier because then Anil Prabhu went to medical school, which is 10 years you study. Now, the fact that you got into the school doesn't mean that you are a physician. You have to go through the 10-year process. Only then you become qualified and authorized to prescribe medicine and so on and so forth, right? Just because the day you enter the school, you cannot walk around and start treating people, right? Right? People say, I heard this example, my spiritual master was speaking this, that people say, why don't you do some practical service? Well, this is practical. When somebody joins medical school and they are sitting in the class hearing lecture, first year student, and somebody says, what nonsense you guys sitting in and hearing lecture? There's so many patients in the ward, you're not taking care of them. You should go and treat them. Why are they simply wasting time sitting hearing lecture here? But unless they systematically learn over a period of time, how will they be qualified to do anything? So similarly, unless we systematically know what is what, we say we should do good. What does good mean? Do we know? Does good mean doing what people want or what people need? And what do people need? These are all questions that we start asking, then it becomes not so obvious. Right? If a child is sick, right? The child may not want medicine, but the child needs medicine. So do you want to give the child what the child wants or what the child needs? As a parent, we don't really want to give the child what the child wants, right? The child wants to eat candy for breakfast, but that's not what the child needs. So from a foolish person's perspective, you're not a well-wisher for the child because the child wants candy and you're giving bread. What kind of cruel parent is it? The child is crying that she wants candy or he wants candy. Look at the cruel dad. He's forcing the child to eat bread. And that's a very foolish perspective. But a wise person will know that no, child is foolish. It's not, candy is not supposed to be breakfast, and the father is making sure the child eats right nutrition. So what is good? Good is giving the child what the child wants or what the child needs. Similarly, when we try to do good, we do good from our own perspective. Is our perspective right? Is it the right perspective? We don't know. So unless we have systematic knowledge, then very difficult. Right? It's like if someone has a brain tumor and they're having a headache for that reason, and you keep prescribing them Tylenol, that may short-term help them, but really not really service. A disservice actually. Similarly, we have this huge problem of not knowing who we are, not knowing where we're going, what is the purpose of life, what will happen when I die. We have no answers to any of these problems. So because I cannot answer any of these questions, I give you some temporary answers that make you, okay, why don't you just watch a movie, right? Somebody goes to a doctor with a life-threatening disease. Doctor says, I really cannot help you with this disease, but why don't you eat some ice cream? You like ice cream. And that's like, I like ice cream, that's true, but I didn't come here for eating ice cream. My problem is, I might die tomorrow. That's fine, but at least you can enjoy ice cream today. That's exactly how we live our lives. And we don't even think about it, saying, okay, no. What is the long-term perspective here? So, next paragraph, somebody wants to read? Single path.
The single path in understanding the transcendental nature of Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, is the chanting of these names of faith and readiness.
So Krishna means one who is the most attractive personality, and Rama is reservoir of pleasure, and Hare addresses the energy of the Lord. So Hara in vocative form is Hare. So you address the energy of the Lord. Essentially, the Prabhupada's translation of this mantra in a very simple way is, you're simply addressing the energy of the Lord and asking the energy of the Lord to engage you in serving the Lord. So such chanting will release one from designated conditions arising from gross and subtle bodies. Okay, this sentence is a little bit of a half-an-hour explanation. Gross and subtle bodies and designated conditions. So we'll skip it for now, and I'll come back to it if there's questions. So again, the last sentence is, in the age of logic, argument, disagreement, chanting Hare Krishna is the only means of self-realization. And let me just explain this sentence above in very short period of time, and then we can have some questions and answers at that point. So everybody has a gross body. Do you know what a gross body is? Made of gross elements. There are 5 gross elements. Gross meaning perceptible, right? Which means, like if you see this pen, it's made of a gross matter. It's actually, it has shape, you can see it, it's relevant, right? But air is there, it's there because we're breathing, but it's more subtle than a pen because you can perceive it, but you cannot actually see it, right? So so there are 5 elements which are air, water, fire, earth, water, fire, air and ether. Bhumi, Apo, Nalo, Vayu, Kham. In Bhagavad Gita it is explained. Bhumi is earth, but literally solids. In physics terms you can say solids. Apo is water, or basically liquids. Anala is fire, or plasma in physics terms, same thing.
Air.
Air. is gases,
Yes.
and ether is space, vacuum. And these are the gross elements. And our human body also is made up of these elements. You have solids, liquids, and blood and water. Right? And then you have fire, because your body maintains temperature. Right? How does it maintain temperature if there is no combustion of some sort going on? Right? So low intensity combustion and high intensity combustion. So it's low intensity combustion. Because even if you walk out and if it's 30 degrees outside, your body still maintains a 97 degree, 98 degree, whatever temperature it maintains. It maintains that. How is that possible? Right? Because if you take something which doesn't maintain temperature, it's going to get cold outside. Like if you take a snake outside and it's 30 degrees, the snake's body will become cold. It doesn't maintain temperature. To that extent as us. But even the snake will maintain temperature because there's digestion going on and so on, but doesn't as much as us. But if you take like a steel pipe and keep it outside overnight, it's going to be very cold in the morning. It's going to be the same temperature or maybe colder than the air outside because it loses heat. But the body, there's this combustion going on. Air is there. We breathe in air. The air goes up and down, fills the lungs and so on. We breathe. And then the space, empty space also in our body. So this is gross body. But then we're also made up of subtle things. So there's mind, intelligence, and there's ego. Prabhupada writes Ahankara as false ego. Our true identity is essentially being servant of Krishna. So that's why Prabhupada translates Ahankara always as false ego. Because when someone says false ego, there's also a true ego, which is really your true identity. So most people are confused about mind and intelligence. They think it's one and the same, but they're actually different. As per our Shastra very clearly explains, psychology of mind and intelligence is very different. So what do you think is the difference between mind and intelligence? That's the reason I wanted to get into this sentence, because this can go into a big thing. So what is the difference you think between mind and intelligence?
Well, my belief is, what I've understood, that intelligence is superior to mind. Intelligence actually is more. Intelligence is something which kind of dictates the mind to do certain things. So it's superior. I can't possibly bring up like an objective difference between the two. Somehow, if you ask my own understanding, I would say intelligence is an executive function of mind based upon my biased understanding of medical knowledge or whatever. But from Shastric viewpoint, whatever I have learned is that intelligence is something also comes. Even if mind is hampered, or mind is affected by certain conditions, brain conditions. These are always intelligence still acting, and I've seen cases like that. So I guess I'm sorry. I feel myself limited about getting some objective difference between the two. Very good.
So the objective difference between mind and intelligence is that intelligence is a discriminator. For instance, simple example: morning alarm rings. Your mind doesn't want to get up. But intelligence says, hey, you have to get up, you have to go to work. Right? Your mind is what you feel like doing. Intelligence gives you discrimination that, no, don't do this. Meeting at 7 o'clock, you need to get ready and go, or you have to finish your rounds and you have to get up and so on and so forth. Very simple example. Right? Your mind, you see laddus, you want to eat 4 laddus. Intelligence says, hey, you'll pay tomorrow if you eat 4 laddus. So eat just one. So that's how the intelligence and mind works. And Prabhu is absolutely right. The intelligence is superior to mind. That's why it is important to train the intelligence with knowledge of Shastra. So you can guide the mind appropriately. If you have wrong information, then you will guide the mind in the wrong way, right? If I train somebody with wrong intelligence, then intelligence is still working, but it's faulty information. Right? It's like any machine that you operate. It's calibrated correctly. Calibration is done correctly, then it works correctly. If you calibrate it completely wrong, the machine will still work correctly, but based on wrong calibration, so the end result will be completely wrong. So its calibration is very important for any machine that you operate, any equipment that you operate. So if you calibrate it wrong, just like in medical equipment also, it'll still give right dosage based on what calibration you give, but if you calibrate it wrong, the end result will be disastrous. The same thing with intelligence. If intelligence is calibrated wrong, it'll still guide the mind, but it'll guide the mind in completely disastrous ways. And then, of course, the other aspect is if you don't at all train the mind to follow the dictates of the intelligence. Right? The whole idea of do what you feel is completely ridiculous because you will never feel anything. Chant when you feel like chanting, then you will never feel like chanting, or you feel like chanting some days. Right? So that's the difference between mind and intelligence. So,
Prabhu, actually, it's the linguistic limitation, Prabhu. Actually, this is some one bhakta pointed this out
right,
to me.
English is the linguistic
Because
limitation.
somehow the traditional understanding is that intelligence actually is a function of brain or mind.
Right.
That's how everybody takes it, Prabhu. It's very hard to explain in English the difference between mind and intelligence because that's how we have been trained to understand the meaning of intelligence. But actually, intelligence is a translation of buddhi, which
Right.
comes from Sanskrit.
Buddhi and manas are
Yeah,
different
yeah.
words.
Mana and buddhi, in fact, has very distinct, like a difference between buddhi, mana and buddhi in Sanskrit. It could be explained very nicely in Sanskrit. You know,
Right.
if you know Sanskrit very well. Unfortunately, very hard to explain in English because
This is the
yeah,
same word.
yeah, it's the same word. Mind, intelligence, same word, sort of like for
Yeah.
many people.
That's why it's harder to understand, but it's very different.
And since we are Indians, like most of us here, we can, if we use the term man and buddhi, then we'll be able to relate better
Right.
than using mind and intelligence. That's,
Like a child is totally controlled by the mind. As you grow older, you become more and more controlled by intelligence. You have discrimination. So somebody was asking one time Prabhupada that children are happy, right? So we should be like children. And Prabhupada said the idea is not that child consciousness is not the objective of life. The objective is Krishna consciousness. So if you're happy because you're ignorant, doesn't mean that that's the right thing.
Just a
Yes,
question. Like,
please.
see, when talking about mind and intelligence, we also have something in Sanskrit or Hindi, whichever this thing they say there's a guna. Like there is a rajogun, there is a tapogun, there is a sattvagun. So how does this relate to a mind or an intelligence? Is it mind or intelligence?
Okay, so this is a whole different topic of three modes of nature. The gunas. Guna means rope. It's like a puppet that controls you. So these are outside of mind and intelligence. These are part of material nature. The gunas are part of material nature. So creation has two aspects, spiritual and material. The three modes are part of material nature, and they are the ones that pretty much control how you act. Various combination of goodness, passion, ignorance will control how you act. So this whole topic of three modes is discussed in great detail in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 13. The whole chapter is like three modes of nature. So very simply, I'll give you very simple explanation, and we can get into more details in subsequent discussions and so on and so forth. But the three modes are outside of mind and intelligence. And if you are not careful, they will pretty much lose you. So the way you can train your mind, you can with intelligence, in the direction of Shastra, to come up above the three modes. So even following Vedic rituals and so on and so forth keeps you within the modes. So Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna asks this question, he says, Traigurnya Vishayaveda, Nistraigurnya Bhavarjuna. He says these Vedas mainly deal with three modes. What is the mode of ignorance, how you can be in the mode of goodness, what activities you can do in the mode of goodness, all these things it deals with. He says, Nistraigurnya Bhavarjuna, come above these three modes. In the end he says, Sarva Dharman Parityaja Mamekam Sharanam. Now that I've told you all the dharmas, now your objective is to transcend them and then surrender to me. So the modes exist. As devotees, our objective is to slowly come above the modes, to become transcendental to the modes.
Is it right we have to say, Prabhu, that modes of material nature, they affect us by affecting our intelligence? Is that right, Prabhu? And that's how, in fact, since our intelligence is affected, like we are helplessly, because intelligence is superior to even body and mind.
Exactly.
So the way we act, what we eat, the way we behave, everything is controlled.
Exactly.
So modes of material nature, in fact, are like beyond our domain,
Right.
because we are totally controlled by them,
Right.
but they affect us by influencing our intelligence.
Exactly. In the third chapter of the Gita, in the end, Arjuna asks this question. He says that, okay, so why people are helplessly acting in this way? And Krishna says that because of lust and anger, which essentially, and the sitting places of lust and anger is mind and intelligence. So it impacts these two areas, and then that's how everything comes. In the second chapter, Krishna says, Dhyate Visham Punsa Sangasteshu Pujayate, Sangha Sanjayate Kaman, Kaman Krodho Pujayate. So whole step-by-step process that first you contemplate on the object of senses. And when the senses are not satisfied, then that leads to lust. Lust is not satisfied, it leads to anger. Anger leads to delusion. So like a step-by-step process of degradation is described. Any other questions on this section that we read?
So this term only actually is very touchy word, because
Which is?
the word only, chanting Hare Krishna is the only mean of self-realization. When we use only, many times, I've seen a lot of people get very touchy about it.
Yeah, it is very touchy.
Yeah, because Christians say the same thing. Christ is the only way to go to heaven. Otherwise, everybody else is going to hell.
Right.
And Muslims say the same thing. So the thing is that out here, could you just elaborate a little bit more, why only?
So Srila Prabhupada, I think, and again, I'll say this with let me say it the right way so that it comes out the right way. That Srila Prabhupada wrote books in a certain time, in a certain place, for a certain audience. And a lot of his books were written as essentially conversations. And he spoke and it was written. And that's how the books were written. And in many times, his conversations were meant for people who were already in a certain context. Right? So people who are already in a Vedic context, if I tell them a certain thing in a certain way, that yes, you have to chant 16 rounds of Hare Krishna Mahamantra, that is what you need to do, then that's a very different thing. If I tell somebody just walking on the street that unless you chant 16 rounds of Hare Krishna Mahamantra, you're going to hell, it's a completely different context. So the context is very important when we understand some of these points. And so Mahaprabhu says in Sikshashtakam, Namna Makari Bauda Nijas Rasaktis Satravita Niyamita Smaranena Kala. What that means is Namnam Akari Baudas. He says that the Lord has many millions of names. And each of these names are equally powerful, important. Right? So but then by saying that the other names of God are not potent or not beneficial, is against that particular injunction on the Shastra that says Nam Nam Akari Bhava. The Lord has millions of names, right? So if you want to chant other bona fide names of God, right? If you want to chant the names of Allah, perfectly. What does Allah mean? Allah means the one who is most merciful. That's a bona fide name of God. And if someone who thinks that by speaking out against other religions or speaking out against Allah, you somehow being a devotee, what is the offense against chanting the holy name? Number 3?
Nam
Criticizing
Vedic scriptures and other
pursuant
of Vedic version. Is Namaprada. So if you blaspheme Quran and Bible and then think that you're somehow preaching Krishna consciousness, our Shastras teach us that is Namaprada. You cannot do that. It's not going to help you. You will not make progress. So God has millions and millions of names. And each of these names have potency of God. And sincerely chanting any name of God is beneficial. Is beneficial ultimately. Because God is absolute. Now having said that, in the context of Gaudiya Vaishnava Parampara, we don't whimsically chant some mantras that we make up. It's like if you are unwell, I cannot whimsically go to a pharmacy and pick medicine and eat. It's ultimately beneficial, it's medicine, so it will help me. No, even if you pick the right medicine, it is taken on the direction of physician and how much to take, when to take, right? If you have some bacterial infection and you prescribe antibiotic and you take that, and doctor says 10 days two times a day you got to take 10 days. You may say, why 10 days? I'll drink the whole thing right now. I'll get rid of the infection today. I don't have patience for 10 days. Is that going to help? I think you probably will die, right? If you do that. Or some serious consequences you'll have to face. So whimsically, you cannot take like that. So even for mundane things, we take things under direction of authority. So under the direction of Srila Prabhupada, who's preaching the mission of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he has given us this particular mantra to chant, that as followers of Mahaprabhu, we know that this process, this path works. You chant the holy name, it works. So what we say is that if you don't have any other process that you're following, or you're unsure about the process you're even following, then try this process, because this definitely works. If you're a sincere practitioner of some other religious form, if you're a sincere practitioner of Islam or some other practice, then do it. But if you don't have any path, or if you're unsure about what to practice, then this is a spiritual path that is extremely bona fide, is extremely powerful, and very easy. You don't have to stand on your head. You don't have to do something dramatic. You don't have to make any major life alterations or anything of that sort. You can continue doing the job you're doing. You can live in your home, have your family. Everything is the same. The only thing is you're adding some Krishna to your life. So you're chanting the holy name. That's why Prabhupada is saying that this is a bona fide process that works. And according to Upanishads, for Kali Yuga, this is the only process that works, is what you're saying. Now, so that's how I would describe it. Not so much from a fanatical perspective, or somehow saying that those who are not following this path are going to hell or something like that. And what is the difference between this and then some other fanatical religion which says that those who don't follow exactly should be killed? We are saying the same thing. It's just except that we are saying we are very merciful, so we won't kill them, but the karmas will kill them themselves. So it's the same thing. The idea is the same. That's not going to be helpful.
Just a question.
Yes.
Because I'm just thinking now, where this mantra came from. Hare Krishna.
So there's a Upanishad called Kali Santarana Upanishad, where it is said that Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Iti Shodashakam Nam, Kali Kalmashanashami, Nata Paropara Upaya, Sarva Vedeshu Drishyate. So Vedas say that there is no other mantra other than chanting this mantra for liberation in Kali Yuga. There's another verse which says that Hare Nam, Eva Kevalam, Kalo Naste, Naste. So chanting of Hari's name is the only way in Kali Yuga to make progress. So this mantra is bona fide in the Shastra, it is there. It's not something that was made up by Srila Prabhupada. This is something that is a bona fide mantra in our Shastra. Krishna means the all-attractive Supreme Lord, Rama means reservoir of pleasure. And this chanting of the 16-word Maha Mantra, 32 syllable 16-word Maha Mantra is very bona fide.
Just taking a quote out of Bhagavad Gita itself, and historically or mythologically putting it, after the war is over, Yudhishthira actually goes to Bhishma, who is actually in that bed of arrows, where he is asking him about, now that I have won this war, what do I do now next? So that's when some people relate that or term the Vishnu Sahasranam to be something which was spoken, the conversation that happened between Yudhishthira, Arjun, Sanjaya, who was actually telepathically visualizing this whole conversation, and Lord Krishna actually telling them what it is. And in fact, Krishna was also not part of the conversation, but he was brought in during as references in many places. And in that, it is part of that. It says that Sri Rama Rama Ramedi Rame Rame Manorame Sahasranama Tatulyam Rama Nama Varaname. So it also says that the only name that is all powerful and all beneficial would be just chanting the name of Ram. And this is actually spoken not by Arjun or by Yudhishthira, it's actually Lord Shiva who is talking to Parvati, and he says that
this is in Padma Puran, this particular word is in Padma Puran. So he's saying, oh Varanane, oh beautiful lady, Shri Ram Ram Rameti Manorame. So he speaks this word saying that the chanting of the name of Ram is 1,000 times more powerful than chanting the name of Hari. So that's how he portrays that. So chanting of Krishna and Ram is again the essence has to be taken. The essence is of that verse is chanting the holy name is all powerful. The chanting of the holy name of the Lord is all powerful is the essence. So any conversation that we hear, the essence has to be gotten. And what ends up happening is, and if you look at the first paragraph of the introduction of the Bhagavad Gita, as it is, Srila Prabhupada, he begins by saying that I was asked by an American lady to recommend Bhagavad Gita translation in English. And I was at a loss because I could not find any ocean and so on and so forth. Then the possibility that I will fully understand it is less than the possibility of your wife fully understanding it. So if she sees an email written in a certain way or letter in a certain way from you, and she can probably figure out what your state of mind is. What exactly are you trying to say? Right? And secondly, if you are saying something which is in plain words, it does not require interpretation. Then if I try to interpret it, then it's also incorrect. In Sanskrit, there is a rule that the secondary meaning, Sanskrit is a language which each word has like 10 meanings. Right? And the grammatical construction is all like that. Very rich language. And the rule is that the secondary meaning is taken only if the primary meaning does not make sense. Right? So for instance, there is I can say something in in Hindi maybe, sentence like, a certain city, like Varanasi, is on the Ganges. So then the question is the city on the Ganges? The city is sitting on top of the Ganges? That understanding makes no sense. Then the secondary meaning is that it's on the bank of the river Ganges. And that's the meaning we get. So the primary meaning doesn't make sense, and the secondary meaning is appropriate. But if the primary meaning makes sense, then there is no need to interpret in secondary meaning. Right? If, for example, in Sanskrit there's the word Saindhava. Saindhava means salt. It also means horse. So if I'm sitting to eat and if I say I need some Saindhava, I cannot bring horse. Right? You speak Tamil also, right? Tamil there's the word Adi. Adi means has 10 meanings. It can mean step, it can mean slap also. Right? But based on or Padi means
the contextual reference that you have.
Padi, it means step, it means
read. A measuring
yeah.
system, even a measuring
so
vessel.
the same word has many meanings, but based on the sentence and the context, you know what it means. So if the primary meaning, like kal in Hindi, right? Kal means yesterday and kal means tomorrow also.
Right.
That is why,
Kal also means like tap also.
Yeah, also in UP.
Yeah.
Kal means
Or null, this is
null,
it.
yeah, null.
Null and kal.
Kal bhi bolte hain actually.
That's why I was working with somebody who's not a native English speaker, and he studied Hindi all his life, and he works in America now. So a lot of times he would say yesterday for tomorrow. and so the American colleagues get really confused, saying, what is he saying? Then I explained to them that the word in Hindi for yesterday and tomorrow is the same word. But sometimes he transposes these words because he gets confused when he speaks English. Because in English it's the same. The other thing is, the other thing which people do is this. In English, the gender is applied to not the subject but the object. Like I'd say, I would say his sister. But in Hindi it's the other way around. It will become her sister. Right? If I say, I'm not very good with Hindi, but what much I know is that if I say Anil's sister, I will say, unki behan, right?
Right.
But if I say Anil's brother, I would say unka bhai. So unki and unka applies to him based on the gender of the object I'm talking about. Whereas in English, it's not like that. I'll say his sister and his brother. I won't say his sister and her brother. But a lot of people who are not
Right.
native English speakers, they will end up saying her brother. And I've heard it many times. They say that, you know, they say her brother came, because that's how they speak Hindi. So it's not like they're just applying the same grammar rule, but in a wrong language. The same thing happens in Shastra, that we have half knowledge, so if we try to understand on our own, we make all these erroneous conclusions from Shastra. That's the reason it's important to have acharyas who give us proper direction. And so whatever I'm speaking here today is not because of any qualification that I have, but I've studied from the disciplic succession, and what my teacher has taught me, from what he's learned from his teacher, exactly is what I'm saying. So I'm confident that as long as I stick to those boundaries, I'm pretty accurate. I can be very, very authoritative because I'm speaking from authority, not my authority, but what I've learned. Right? I know that this is how it is, and as long as I stick to my swim lanes, I'll be okay. If I start speaking things that I don't really understand or realize and start saying maybe it is like this, maybe I feel it is that way, then I'm totally deviating. I could be way wrong. So that is why the intent of those verses is glorification of holy name. The Sahasranama, Vishnu Sahasranama, is nothing but glorification of holy name. Nothing but glorification of holy name. So if we chant Vishnu Sahasranama every day, it's nothing but glorification of holy name. It's perfectly bona fide. It's fine. But if we do it every day, then it's fine. So the point is, most people who are interested in all these different philosophies, but not really interested in following anything. So if someone asks me that, hey, Vishnu Sahasranama, is it good or bad? Wonderful. Do you chant every day? No. Right? It's like asking diet questions that, is this good? But you should follow the diet then. Right? Having all the knowledge in your head and not then eating whatever you want is not the point. If you have good knowledge of diet, then you should follow it. Similarly, if you have understanding of Vishnu Sahasranama, wonderful. Right? We should chant every day. Hare Krishna Mahamantra is very easy. Very, very easy. No, you can chant anytime. So mantras typically that have Om in them have certain rules and regulations you have to follow. Like Gayatri Mantra is very strict rules and regulations. You cannot simply chant. You know, nowadays it's become very prevalent. Like there's so many different groups that have Gayatri Mantra, Havan and so on and so forth. It's completely non-Vedic. Not at all authorized. You cannot do stuff like that. Gayatri mantras are not chanted loudly at all, first of all. You cannot chant such a way that other people can hear loudly. You cannot say it that way. Very clearly in the Shastra, it is mentioned. Gayatri mantras are supposed to be chanted softly. You cannot loudly chant Gayatri mantra. Only certain people can chant Gayatri mantra based on purification processes that you've undergone and so on and so forth. Right?
Even in Upanayana, where you actually have the sacred thread, it's the father who actually tells it in the ears of the son. That's how it is recited. It's not publicly as you loudly over a mic or microphone or something.
Not done that way. And again, this whole, and Krishna says about this also in Gita. Chaturvarna Maya system, Guna Karma Vivasa. He says that these 4 systems of Varna and Ashrama created by me based on Guna and Karma. But now it has become Janma. That's the problem. Right? So just because your father is a doctor doesn't mean Arjun automatically becomes privileges to have in the hospital, right? You cannot say, hey, my dad has privileges, so once he retires,
More of profession based rather than.
He has a better chance.
He has a better chance of becoming,
but not necessarily like he might become something else, like
right.
Depending upon
but
his
you
own.
cannot just say, hey, my father is retired, so now please give me privileges.
It was more based on the qualification a particular person had.
Guna and Karma, exactly. So the Shastric term for that is Brahmana Bandhu. Means a relative of Brahmana. So when Ashwatthama, he did such abominable activities of killing the children of the Pandavas and so on and so forth, he did all that. He was called Brahmana Bandhu, means that his father was Brahmana, relative of Brahmana, but no longer has any Brahmanical qualities. Dija Bandhu. So nowadays even the Brahmanas are all Dija Bandhus. So unless we practice properly, then we don't get the qualification be Brahmin. So
Most
the
of
point
us not
is-
even good Shudras, bro.
Yeah, you're not even good Shudras.
We're not even qualified Shudras.
You're not even
Shud-
qualified Shudras.
Shudras are supposed to do 100%. Whatever master says, you have to just do it, and we probably do 10, 15%, 20% at the most.
And if some of the master is giving 5% more money, then we can run to that.
Right, yeah. I mean, Shudras are not supposed to do that.
But it's not qualification.
Yeah. So we are less than Shudras actually.
Kala Shudra Sambhava. Shastras say that everybody in Kali is Shudra. So I didn't cover much, I just covered one chapter. If you want to read the second part also, you can read. It's what, 12:15? You should stop now.
Okay.
Only thing is the kids are getting restless. That's the only thing.
Alright, we want to chant around. People are interested in chanting, seeing how it works.
Sure. One round will do.
Everybody is at Chapamala.
Yeah, I have the malas.
So we chant very simply. There's no rules and regulations for anything. Yes.
I heard somewhere 1000 Vishnu Sahasranam is equivalent to 1 Mahamantra.
I've heard, but I mean authoritatively I've not heard, so I don't want to say anything. But
It is little less than one Mahamantra. If you take number of mantras you're chanting, but the thing is that Shastras say that Ram and Krishna, in fact, they have much higher potency because mantras are made in different, the potencies are different, depending on what mantras we chant. They try to, Ram, as you said earlier, 1,000 times more potent than saying Hari. And if you count the number of mantras, one Mahamantra actually, if you count the number, Vishnu Sahasranam is like 3/4 of one Mahamantra, sorry, one round actually of Mahamantra. And Mahamantra takes shorter time as well. In 6 to 8 minutes you can do one Mahamantra. So Vishnu Sahasranam takes a lot of time to do it methodically. So Mahamantra is a practical way of
exactly.
Chanting Lord's names. It's very practical.
And let me also share my realization. That's my personal realization is that as we really want to focus on spiritual development, then questions like how many number, value, all this should become really relevant. Because it's really not that important. Even questions on karma, which prarabdha karma, what is this karma, how is it's really irrelevant. Because it's really outside our control. Right? What karma we came with, what we did in past life is completely out of our control. So the only thing that's in our control is sadhana.
It says Bhagavad Gita, right? Just do your duty. Leave the rest to God, because you cannot be responsible for the outcome. Even He takes the responsibility of it. That's how, if I would interpret it from a layman's perspective, whatever your duty is, do it, and with wholeheartedly.
Yeah. So I don't want to get into the whole discussion. But during prasadam time, maybe we'll talk. But Krishna says a lot more than that. That whole verse of Karmarnevadikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana, people know the first part. They actually didn't forget the second part. Right? But ma karma phalhetu mate sangato karmani says that. But that really comes in second chapter of Gita in the middle. Gita has 18 chapters. Right? So most people think that becomes the crux of the Gita. But that is one of the verses that is popular. That's in the second chapter of the Gita out of the 18 chapters of the Gita. Right? So the crux of the Gita is Sarvadharman Parityaja Mamekam Sharanam Vraja. Right? And so that comes when he's explaining a concept called Nishkam Karma Yoga. The whole concept of Karmarnevadikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana. So this is the whole yoga ladder. So for some reason unknown to me, that one verse has become very popular, and so people think that is like the essence of the Gita.
Half of that one verse.
And that half of that one verse.
Actually, the next line, in fact, is more important than the first line, actually.
So Garan Prabhu was saying one time that, he was talking about this verse, and he says that if working hard is the criterion, then even Duryodhana was working so hard. Nobody can claim that he was slacker, right? He was working so hard. And as a king, he was actually not a bad king.
He was a first-class Kshatriya.
Yeah, he was first-class Kshatriya. Nothing. He was not a bad king. It's not like his subjects were suffering. But his whole kingdom was based on adharma. That was the problem. So, simply doing duty, as a Kshatriya was doing his fine duty, but it was based on adharma. The problem was he was not pleasing Krishna. That was the issue. Right? So, ultimately the objective of human life is to please God. If that doesn't happen, then everything else you do is just total waste.
I've seen the whole reason for Lord Krishna coming to this, this material realm was to prove this point that life should be around pleasing him. Like, he wanted to prove the point actually.
Right.
Lord Ramchandra, he was too polite to do that. So Lord Krishna came and he proved in many ways actually, even in his Bal Lila and different other so that's the kind of he was trying to prove each and every moment that each and every person's duty is to please him. If you don't please him, then you're in trouble.
So exactly, it's like one of those examples that a rich man, he was working in his garden, and he liked the gardens. He was working in his garden. So some people came for collecting donation, and so they saw this guy working in the garden. They thought he was the gardener, and they asked him, "Is your boss in the house?" And so he asked, "What do you want?" He says, "I want to talk to the boss." He said, "No, but tell me what you want." I said, "Why should I tell you? I want to talk to the boss." And then this finally said, "I'm the boss. I'm the owner of the house. I'm just gardening here." So what is the reaction of the people who are coming for the donation? They have to apologize, saying, "Oh, sorry, I didn't realize that." Or they may think that, "Look at this guy. He's a gardener and he thinks he's the owner of the house. What nonsense!" And that is how mostly we react. That why is Krishna sitting in this asana? He's asking us to pay obeisance system. He gets nothing. Purely from a Shastri perspective, right? The Lord is Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamayate, which means he's like infinity. Infinity plus infinity is infinity. Infinity minus infinity is infinity. So just because we offer him some bhoga or offer him he doesn't get anything. It's not like if you don't offer him bhoga, he will not get anything. He's complete in himself. But these activities are for our benefit. So the whole Bhagavad Gita has to be understood in its entirety. The problem with picking and choosing parts of the Gita that we like is that it doesn't give us the full information that we should understand. So the Bhagavad Gita is not a series of instructions that pick the instruction that you like. That is not how it is. It is one book, 700 verses. Has to be understood in entirety. So I also teach the Gita in Harrisburg, and I can do like courses for people to understand also. It's important to understand in entirety so that then we can really understand what Krishna is trying to say. So again, I'm not saying what you're saying is wrong. All I'm saying is that it is a part of what the Gita is. So when we say we should do our duty, the biggest question is what really is our duty? Who determines that? Right? How do you know that you're doing your duty? So these are the questions that are a little harder to explain. So we will stop here. I think it's already 12:30. I don't know if I did what you had planned, but
No, that's fine.
do we have time for a round or we just do our
Can you come to
That's okay.
I believe at 1:30 because I have another class at 3.
You want more? Thank you.
Finger the gun. Lenchu.
So really chant is typically don't use the index finger for chanting. You should use this finger. Otherwise there's no real rules. You can just chant. And with each mantra you use one beat.
Rohit, mala le lo your type. Rohit, mala le lo.
Do we start from here or this one?
From the big one.
Okay.
Do you want to give that Sri Prabhu also a big beat because it's much easier to handle?
Yeah, sure.
Don't topple the water. That's
Start from. Yeah, start from.
Okay.